So these questions are going to be for both of you. Um, since you're all advocates for disability issues in cultural, academic, and even personal motivations, what is the single fact you have learned through this journey that has inspired your forward movement in your personal evolution?
I mean, this is such a really complicated question for me. I came into my disability identity, my professional identity, my academic identity during the course of making this film. Like it's literally a coming of age story for me in so many ways. I started as a student on the project and then I just sort of stayed, I guess. Whether you guys wanted me or not, I was then became sort of part of the writing and production team.
Indispensable. You were indispensable.
Um, but you know, like so for me, it was a transition from like I'm seeing myself in these films, and I am a student who's sort of taking notes to actually getting to have such access to such amazing mentors in Salome and Susan and Carrie to learn how to think independently and learn how to kind of develop my sense of self and my sense of critique in relationship to the sheer, I mean, in some cases, harm, right? Like, I mean, I spent hours and hours, I mean, we all did, spent hours and hours watching film after film after film, assembling clip after clip. Like, I learned how to use video editing tools to like layer them. And you can't, like, I don't think I knew at the time just what I was learning in doing those processes of like how much just that constant interaction you hone that critique and getting the wit and the sarcasm from Susan and Salome and Carrie kind of refracted through my own critique. It that will forever change the kind of academic I am, but also my relationship to disability and the community. Like there's so much power and humor and love in imagining the world differently that I think I learned in the process that you can't unlearn. And as a disabled person, that's a survival mechanism in a
Excellent.
world that's built for non-disabled people. And
Right.
it's a survival mechanism. I think we hope we conveyed in the film, like that level of critique. But it's something that will has changed my life and will.
For me, the transformation started when I began working with Susan in like 2002. But in direct response to your question, I think I learned never to think about, to use the word inspiration, not to feel, not to identify with that process, and not to, that it's not useful and it's misleading. That, people who, even people with really challenging disabilities are living their everyday lives. They're not out there to inspire able-bodied people. We all need to take each other where we are and appreciate that.
So one of the more interesting assertions in the film, and one I never really even thought about, was how movie monsters like Frankenstein represent our fear of bodily differences, and the rejection of those monsters actually create their monstrosity. In your perspectives, how can we view horror films through a different lens based on what monstrosity is in the movies?
I just remember in Moby Dick, he Melville talks about the white whale as a monster that's there to show us something, coming from demonstrate to show. Yeah, so I think the monster is a tool to show us things we don't want to see about ourselves, like a shadow figure, the dark side that we don't want to look at. So I think they're very useful because, and I don't think that I would change that in terms of, I think we need to have mechanisms both in everyday life and in representation that open our eyes or, open our minds to behaviors, attitudes, cultural issues that we'd ordinarily be shut down about. But that's kind of the way, it's kind of like how humor is used to penetrate our defenses. I think also fear, and the figures of monsters are used in that way, and we need them.
Very interesting.
I'm thinking about two things. I'm thinking, right, I went straight to like Get Out, and sort of the like the monster in that film is not bodily difference. The monstrosity is the sort of white racism. And that's a different kind of horror, right? But
Mhm.
then I went to like the end scene of Freaks, where like the beautiful woman is sort of turned into the chicken lady.
Mhm.
And I'm like, there is some kind of like joy and absurdity there that is like, that form of bodily difference works in the context of the film because you have this community of disabled people. I mean, I don't know, I can't even say it because they are monstrous because of the bodily difference that happens, but the monstrosity unfolds over the course of the character showing who they are. And so like I think there are ways to play with bodily difference and as productive, but it has to be done in ways where it's not the only, or it's not this like easy hand metaphorizing of disabled equals horrific equals, and that being sort of juxtaposed against like the entire cast of able-bodiedness who are the heroes.
Since the majority of our society have issues in their encounters with disability, and the media narrowly portrays the disabled in the themes you spoke about in the documentary, what would you recommend a person do to educate themselves on the issues of the disabled?
Well, I would think right off the bat, make sure you have a lot of people with disabilities in your life. Have friends, have partners, lovers, family members. Just understand what people, just like with in any respectful relationship, you want to find out what people want.
And I think, disability culture is vibrant, and culture and community is vibrant and growing every day.
Mm.
And I think it does take some really concrete and conscious efforts to seek out and engage with what might be a sort of subcultural or countercultural like materials to counter this much larger dominant representation of disability. But it's much more freely available than it was 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And I think, being really deliberate about like, what are disabled content creators doing? Like, read Susan Nussbaum's Good Kings, Bad Kings. Read the stuff that disabled people are writing, fiction, nonfiction, see films, check out YouTube channels, like, because then you're also not getting like the single picture. And I think that's like
Mhm.
being really deliberate about seeking out alternative stories that come from the community, and lots of them.
This is Patrick McDonald for HollywoodChicago.com. Copyright 2022.